Nick, you and I both finished a very big game this week. The Evil Within. I initially shared my first impressions, which got a lot of traction. A lot of people, came out and supported The Evil Within. And I think me playing it, me talking about it, and maybe some of the comments, who knows, motivated Nick to jump into it himself. And now we've both crossed the finish line at the same time, even though he's playing on survival and started like 2 weeks after me. We're not going to talk about that. It's not really about difficulty, even though my first impressions were entirely about the fact that the game is better on survival difficulty. We're going to ignore that. Nick, first of all, what did you think of The Evil Within having now rolled credits? On the base game, there is a story DLC, I believe, that neither of us, I have not touched. I don't know if you've...
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I haven't played it. Overall, I really enjoyed it. It is definitely a game that has rough edges. It's not particularly polished in many spots, but I think a lot of... to put it simply, I'm picking up a lot of what the game is putting down, basically. So, as far as like, an actiony, horror-y kind of game, I think I was kind of in the mood to play one. Obviously, like you mentioned, our previous discussions, and also just, Tango popping up in the news again. I was like, oh, I played chapter 1 and 2. Maybe I should go back and finish the game. So, pretty much just been chipping away at it the last couple weeks. And yeah, I had a lot of fun. There's one chapter in particular that we might get into that I really did not like towards the end of the game. But yeah, overall, I mean, I think it's a well-designed game, but the rough edges do hamper the fun in a couple of spots, is how I would like succinctly describe my experience.
Okay. I see you're giving your seemingly spoiler-free impressions here. So I'll also... I'll approach it lightly as well before we kind of dive into it, because this is a conversation I've been interested to have since I rolled the credits on the game like 5 days ago at this point. And I keep saying roll the credits. Guys, take a sip of water every time I say that. Anyway, initially, kind of this game makes a really strong first impression in terms of it feels very bold. It almost feels, I don't know if I would say in your face, but it's such like a strong kind of identity that it kind of makes for itself, if that makes sense. That immediately I was pretty curious just to see where it goes. And I said this before, but every like 2 or 3 chapters, it kind of something weird happens that like totally changes where you are in the game. At least I thought so. And so like it's really unpredictable in terms of like where it would kind of go in the narrative, going forward. And so yeah, it's this weird combination. I also kind of looking at it specifically as a Resident Evil spiritual successor. There's a lot that it kind of does that I think maybe even that the Resident Evil series kind of got into later on in the life cycle, because this game came out in 2011, right? I think. So
I think later than that, because it's a cross-gen game.
2013.
Yeah, I think
2014 actually. Yeah. Oh shit. Yeah, it came out on PC 360, PS3, Xbox One, and PS4. Oh wow. Yeah. Okay. So 2014. So 10 years now, actually. So it's been a decade. And by the way, I mean, we can get into it more later, but are you planning on jumping into the sequel?
I want to. As we've talked about off camera a couple of times, the plate for the foreseeable future is a little full for stuff that I want to play.
Yes,
but
yeah.
I would like to get to the sequel.
I'm really curious
sometime in October,
because in the by the way, thanks to everybody who supported the first episode, or the first part where we talked about The Evil Within, the clip. Again, you can check it out, watch.respawnstation.com. And there's a lot of comments on that video that were saying how much they loved The Evil Within. And I keep seeing people say either that the second game is not as good, or it's just like, oh, it's really different, and so it's, you can be a fan, but it's totally different. So
it's very polarizing because you basically, I was talking with my one friend Shane, who's played both of them and is a big fan of Shinji Mikami and everything.
Yeah,
and it's seemingly like within the fan base of the Evil Within, like there's the people that champion the first game and then the people that champion the second game, and rarely is there people that like both. Basically,
sure, right,
because they do have different directors. The first game being directed by Shinji Mikami, and the second game being directed by John Johannes, who did Hi-Fi Rush. So there is going to be some stylistic differences, I know.
Sure, right.
But yeah, I think, from my understanding, my casual understanding, it's, the first game has its core audience and its type of experience, and the second game kind of changes a lot going forward.
Huh. Yeah, I mean, it is interesting now, having played Hi-Fi Rush, kind of getting the those little Easter eggs in it, and I'm like, oh, I get the jokes about how, like, what kind of a personality Castellanos has. Now, okay, with that said, you've heard our spoiler-free, generally dancing around this topic. Nick, explain to me what the fuck happened in that game. Explain to me this ending, Nick. Tell me what you got.
Basically, the very similarly to Resident Evil. I mean, I might personally bring this up several times, but
sure.
Like, Resident Evil 4 is a good cornerstone to kind of compare the games.
Yeah,
they have like their similarities in structure and overall vibes at certain points.
Sure, yeah.
But for basically, like Resident Evil, for me, the first part of the game, I have no idea what's going on. It's usually just like, they plop you into this place. There's, mystery abound, basically, and you're trying to piece things together as you go.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit more significantly so with the Evil Within, because Sebastian is a detective. So I think they're maybe trying to obfuscate some things to try to put you in that kind of mind space where you're trying to piece together, all these disparate elements.
Sure. Yeah.
At a certain point in the game, it is, revealed that we are in the mind of the main antagonist, essentially.
Inception.
It's pretty much, yeah. Like your Matrix hooked up to this brain, and that kind of explains why some of the kind of like what you were describing, where you kind of like just almost by random appear in different spots, or like these very kind of hard to describe things are happening.
Yeah.
Like the city's exploding, and then there's creatures coming out of blood and all this other stuff.
Yeah.
So it gets a little bit in the weeds there, but once that kind of revelation happened, I was like, oh, okay, this is starting to make a lot more sense now.
Yeah.
And then you get bits and pieces of the backstory of the main antagonist, the villain, Ruvik, who was like this kid that got like horribly burned in a barn. Yep. And his
sister died, right?
Yeah, his sister died, and he believe, like eventually, yeah.
Well, and I believe that, again, correct me if I'm wrong, Chad. I'm sure someone will. That so Castellanos was married and I believe had a child who then also died in fire, or maybe just, is it in fire or died? And so I think that's the.
It was a fire at their house, but it was left up to interpretation whether it was a arson or an accident. Right. That's not clearly said.
And his wife, I think she's just not. I don't know what happened to his wife. I don't know if she's not dead. I don't think she's dead. They
basically
divorced?
What happened was, after the daughter's death, they started becoming more distant.
Yeah.
And his wife, who also worked as like I don't know if she was a detective or like a cop of some sort.
Yeah.
She was investigating some group, basically, and eventually she disappears. And prompts Sebastian. Basically, he receives like a letter or something in one of the documents I read that's from his wife saying that like if he's getting it, I must be dead, kind of a thing. And it was basically like, keep looking into this more or less.
Sure,
was right. What the letter
and that's
entailed.
what kind of brings to the start of the game. And yeah, the I feel like, first of all, I do like the game. I feel like we're going to be very critical of it, but it's kind of just unpacking because there's so much in this game, and anytime you involve dreams into it, it's like, all right, now let's hold on a second. And as you were saying, I think that as much as it is, dreams, I think it also works against the game, and it's kind of a twofer. So one, if you can look at the game in terms of, okay, it's this different, it's a semblance of interesting horror sequences, and just you're in it for those like the minute to minute thrills, and that's it. And the story itself is like generally described pretty interesting too. Obviously, you can obviously enjoy it a lot, but I think it also works against it in terms of making it feel a bit kind of disjointed. Obviously, I think it's part of the intention as well, but it just I don't know. That is kind of what maybe is a little weird about the game in terms of it feels like a bunch of ideas kind of thrown together, and because it's dreams, we can get away with a lot more.
Yeah, I think it, because of the setup of it being in the one character's brain, kind of like you said, I think it lets you get away with it more, but at the same time I do kind of get what you mean. It whether or not this is actually the case, it feels like the type of game where they had all of the cool gameplay ideas and then built the story around that, but like didn't have enough runway to connect it all like super cleanly. That's at least the vibe that I kind of got from it, because it definitely follows a formula where it's like you kind of get like your big cutscene at the beginning, a big cutscene in the middle, a big cutscene at the end, and then you're just kind of moving from set piece to set piece. So
now those are kind of the general kind of thoughts in terms of you could go either way about the fact that it's a dreamlike thing, right? Like I can see both liking it and not liking it. I sit somewhere in the middle. At the end, it kind of leaves you going a little bit like, okay, hold on, what the hell just happened? But I do think that the final boss is really underwhelming, and especially because since like some of the other like the Sadist, for example, is so. Even on regular difficulty, but obviously on Sadist, on survival difficulty, it's a little bit more kind of intense. But that boss like took so much, like, okay, I got to do this, and then we gotta like work it through, the path I'm gonna take, the traps I'm gonna set, and then the by the end of the game, and I kind of said this when I was talking about just changing the difficulty, where I said that like survival difficulty, The Evil Within feels sort of like Resident Evil 4, but then like on easy or on casual, whatever the normal difficulty is, it feels like a Resident Evil 5. But I actually think that naturally the game ends up becoming that anyway. Like it starts off in this kind of contained, intense, kind of grounded horror, and by the end, it's like this fucking giant claw hand is coming out and scraping down, the skyscraper is fucking collapsing, and you're like, okay, I'm here,
grabbing onto a machine gun, mounted
this
on a
fucking
car that's being swung at like 90 miles an hour. Like...
and I'm like, okay, maybe we're treading into Resident Evil 6 territory here at the end, like at the climax of the battle. And then so when it does that, and then it has this like kind of crazy gradient of a horror experience in one game. Granted, it's about like 15 hours, I think, total. But it does that, and then it ends with like this kind of like, okay, let me think about the ending. it leaves you a little bit like, okay, you can't do both. You can't fuck me over in terms of like, not knowing what the fuck is going on, and then also expect me to ponder about it. Mm-hmm. But that being said, I do that's my only negative I'll say about the game.
Narrative parts set aside, I do really like how over the top that ending is. Like it is something that I'm coming to realize is kind of almost hallmarked in a lot of Mikami's games.
Yeah.
I mean, even Resident Evil 4 has that too, where like, even ending with like a rocket launcher, like blasting the shit out of this giant monster. Like,
yeah,
I think because it's set in the dream world or whatever, it allows them to go like that crazy. But then like, yeah, it kind of calls into question, like, what is death like for Sebastian? Because he just gets impaled on this metal spike while firing rockets and everything. Yeah. So
I will say when that happened, I let out an actual gasp. I was like, oh shit. Like I was like, oh, he's dead. But and then no, hopefully he had some green juice to pour on it, like Ethan Winters.
Yeah, I think gameplay wise, some of those rough edges that I was talking about, I feel like the aiming isn't like super clean or as clean as I would want. Like, sure, I get that it's survival horror, and sometimes that is like, intentional to try to put you in, the character's shoes and everything. But it just kind of feels like maybe like it's just not as precise, because like it skips around a little bit. I feel when you're aiming.
Missed like crazy in the game. Mm-hmm. I mean, there was so many points where I was like, I'm choking just incredibly bad. Like, you know what I mean? Like in these intense situations. Mm-hmm. I definitely think the game controls a little slower. Like there is a running mechanic that kind of speeds things up, but like I find that like, there are times, and look, obviously I was definitely panicked. But like I was trying to get into a door, and I just kept going to one side of the doorway and then the other side of the doorway, and I couldn't go through the door.
I was doing that a lot with trying to pick up items. Like there would be like a sweet spot that you would have to like angle your camera or whatever to be able to pick up items, and it would constantly just like move too much for me to focus and be like, okay, just grab the jar. It's right there. Like, please.
Yeah.
That was kind of like my main issues. I do want to talk about chapter 13, which was my
casualties
low point of this game. Yes.
Yo, I just can we just appreciate I locked in there. It does just pure memory. Okay, go ahead. Sorry, I had to.
This is the one that basically takes place in like the hotel.
Yeah,
and it's all narrow corridors. There's one-hit kill traps everywhere. There's freaking, Altair cosplayer down the hall screaming whenever you come in to spawn another one-hit kill creature.
Yep.
Very limited ammo. And then to top it all off, you get towards the end, and there's just this room that's on fire with other traps and Roombas that go around and explode. Like,
yeah, dude.
It was Roombas. Like pretty much every annoying part of the gameplay put into one chapter.
There. Yeah. No, it definitely was. I think some of that's the thing. Okay, I think, and maybe I'm like doubling down on my opinion as we're not talking about it, but I appreciate the first half of this game so much more than the second half. And again, part of it is natural game design. I totally get that. You have to ramp up the difficulty and make things harder as the game goes on. That's kind of naturally how games work. That being said, yeah, there's some like ridiculous one-hit kill stuff in the second half of this game. I don't remember if the sadist is an immediate one-hit kill, but like it felt like much more, easier to get around. Even like there's this that one, the demon girl thing that like kind of followed you around. Even that, I was like, okay, I can, I can work with this. It's a kind of a practical threat, I guess I could deal with. But yeah, like the fucking spotlight that like as soon as you zap it, like touch into the spotlight, you're dead. The trap, there's one trap where like I hit a wire that I don't even know. I think I probably need like a play-by-play second by second replay to figure out how I hit it, but it was insta death, and you just had to go back, do it again.
The acid traps, the enemies that had explosive crossbows,
yeah,
and kind of like later Resident Evils when they get freaking guns. Some of those later enemies that
they just kind of like fire
the machine gun one that has like sniper like accuracy from like all the way over the level. It's like, okay, like
yep.
I guess I just got to get stun locked here because this guy's gonna fire at me every 2 seconds, like. So yeah, like it's. I overall I really enjoyed the game. And
yes, me too. I know I've been ragging on it.
Aesthetically speaking, I think it looks really cool. Like the color grade on the game is very, grungy, and
that's part of why I thought it was like a 2011 game. It felt like a PS3 game, to be honest. And I totally mean that in like a, there is a quality and certain kind of, as you're saying, grunge to some of those games that added to its, like, it was like, a texture to the game. And so it definitely sells it, or is an asset.
Yeah, like the sound design is awesome. So there's definitely a lot that I really liked about the game. But yeah, it was just like a couple spots like that. There's a couple like I think bad checkpoints too that always gets under my nerves when you're trying to do like 20 different things and then you make one mistake and then it's like, oh, back to 20 minutes ago. It's just like great.
I will say, shit. Now I'm going to bring up more negatives, and people are going to be like, oh, you hated the game. I'm not. I don't hate the game. There's also, I think, at a point, there's like the I don't know, maybe there's the fact that the save states, I couldn't find, not the save states, but like I couldn't get into the places where like the nurse Jackie woman is by the counter, and I forget what the hell that's called, but you have to go through a cracked mirror to get there. And there was times at the end I was like, I couldn't get there. I was like, why is this so out of the way to get to the upgrades thing? So that was a kind of a hitch towards the end of the game. Man, maybe it's the length of the game. Maybe it needs to be like.
I think it is a tad too long. It wasn't that big of like a negative for me.
Yeah.
But I think thinking about how that last third of the game, especially when you get to like the destroyed city levels, how it doesn't really feel like it's adding anything different in that area outside of just adding more like annoying enemies to the mix and stuff. Like I think maybe like one of those chapters or just like a little bit more of that could have been truncated a bit. Like again, like I kind of similar to the ending. I like how over the top the bus level is, where you're being chased by the giant spider. But like some parts of that, I feel like maybe could have been shortened a little bit.
Yeah. Either way, I want to emphasize, I like the game. Nick also liked the game. Just because we're being critical of some of the aspects doesn't mean it's a bad game. It definitely has a strong voice that I appreciate.
The premise is basically what kind of draws me in, because it's like, you have the gameplay sensibilities of like a Resident Evil, but with more of the like surrealist imagery that like Silent Hill is more so known for and stuff. So I kind of liked how it combined those two different elements while also still having like a distinct feel and look of its own. Like it isn't just directly a Resident Evil game or anything like that. It definitely is its own thing. It just takes a lot of inspiration from those other games.
Yeah, and rightly so, in some effective ways. Overall, though, if you are a horror fan, this one's an easy recommendation. I mean, I would say I'm a horror fan, and it took me a while to get to this one, but the whole experience was just kind of like this, experiencing first of all, finding out right before I started playing that it was this spiritual successor to Resident Evil, and then being such a big fan of Resident Evil and kind of experiencing it that way was really, really, really interesting. And well, here we are. I don't know, as we were saying at the start, I don't know when we'll get to The Evil Within 2. But eventually when we do, I'm looking forward to seeing how it is, good or bad, and how that conversation will kind of change.
Yeah, for sure.